shot in a hail of bullets outside a Tacoma nightclub. Detectives are still there, trying to find any clues that might lead them to a killer.
Free be real, man.
Yeah, be real, free my nigga.
Be the real, man. Free my bro. Be real, you feel me? Free the Wayne, man.
Hey, oh God, free everybody in the chain gang.
My wrongdoing that I've done at 15 years old, and I was being manipulated like by the Tacoma Police Department, Detective Gene Miller. I was charged with the firearm. My fingerprints was tied to the gun. Verrick had no idea that what was going on. He didn't know we was there. He didn't have no kind of idea what was going to happen. He didn't know nobody was going to shoot, but I just want Verrick's innocence to be heard and for him to be set free to spend time with his family, friends, and his loved ones that he lost.
My name is Verrick Yarbrough, and 14 years ago, when I was 17 years old, I was abducted by the Tacoma Police Department and framed for a murder that I didn't commit. This wrongful conviction can possibly turn into a wrongful death sentence. This COVID-19 is spreading wild in here. I'm being neglected of medical treatment. As you can see my face, you can see, you know? And this stuff is killing people in here every day. People are dying, people are getting sick, and I'm sitting here for no reason. I ask that you please hear my cry for help and support the petition on my behalf. We have all the evidence to prove my innocence.
Hello, my name is Greg Hughes, and there's something I'd like to get off my chest. In 2006, I helped to frame an innocent man, Verrick Yarbrough, to life in prison for a murder he did not commit. How I know this is because the murder weapon that was used and that was involved in the murder, me and my cousin Ron had stolen out of a house. Ron had it in Club Friday. Verrick didn't know we was going to Club Friday. He had no knowledge of us being at Club Friday or what was going to happen. He's been incarcerated for 15 years, missing his family, his friends, and his loved ones, and to watch his kids grow. He's been strong and very strong-minded in keeping his composure together in prison for a murder he did not commit. He's been doing time for somebody for 15 years of their actions. Now it's time for him to be free. Now the truth is out. Now I know the truth. You know the truth. I was manipulated at 15 years unknowingly to help frame him by Detective Gene Miller. I had already told Detective Gene Miller the truth, and he switched the lies and the names around to place on Verrick because he was already incarcerated. He didn't want me to think it was a good idea to blame Ron because Verrick was already incarcerated. So he made me think that I was doing the right thing. I didn't know nothing. I was 15 years old. Now this man sits in prison screaming his innocence and waiting for his voice to be heard. We ask you guys to please hear this out and understand that this is a cry for help. This is my push for what I've done wrong and to let the truth be heard. Yeah, I was charged with the firearm. My fingerprints was tied to the gun. I was manipulated at 15 years old, and this man's been in prison for 16 years. Imagine how he's feeling and what he's going through. It is my wrongdoing that I've done at 15 years old that I had no knowledge of, and I was being manipulated like by the Tacoma Police Department, Detective Gene Miller. I'm sorry for this late comeback, but I just want Verrick's innocence to be heard and for him to be set free to spend time with his family, friends, and his loved ones that he lost. Verrick had no idea that what was going on. He didn't know we was there. He didn't have no kind of idea what was going to happen. He didn't know nobody was going to shoot. He didn't know Ron was going to shoot. Detective Gene Miller had it out for Verrick, and once Verrick was already arrested, he was doing anything and everything to keep him where he was at in county to face this murder charge that he didn't commit. I would just like for us to be heard, our team to be heard, Verrick's voice to be heard, and his case to be heard. And I really would like for me to be heard. It's been weighing on me, and I really want this out. Thank you.
Now, as I was saying with regards to this physical evidence, physical evidence in this case does not change. It cannot change. We have 5 shell casings here on the east sidewalk. This is right in front of the learning sprout. It doesn't matter what a witness says, these casings don't move. Further south, we got 3 bullet fragments. These are embedded in the concrete. It doesn't matter what you remember or how you saw it, those bullet fragments are in that concrete right there, they don't move. Likewise, we got 1 more shell casing down here. This shell casing and these 5 shell casings were all proven to be from a .380 caliber handgun, all fired from the same weapon. Right here, this is where Mr. Sims' body was found. According to the officer on the scene, he was laying on his stomach, resting on his left cheek. His head was facing northwest, his feet southeast.
Verrick was standing at this green dot.
Now, interestingly, we know the shell casings are here. This is about 3 car stalls to the north. As testified to at trial, .380 caliber gun, the bullets eject to the right and back, which would have put the shooter about here.
Tiffany Walker places Verrick Yarbrough exactly where other states' witnesses placed Verrick Yarbrough without a gun. This location is 20 to 30 feet up the street away from where a gun was fired. Furthermore, evidence proves Razio Sims, the victim, was shot and killed by a bullet to the back of the head from a .380 automatic. Again, firearms specialists testified that .380 automatic shell casings eject inches to the right. These .380 shell casings were not only to the left of Verrick Yarbrough, but 30 feet down the block away from Verrick Yarbrough.
But like I said, the physical evidence doesn't change, and the physical evidence doesn't lie, and it doesn't forget.
The next 2 state witnesses, T.R. Bradley and Unique Richardson, claimed to be with the victim when he was shot. They placed Verrick Yarbrough in the same location 30 feet away from the shell casings and denied seeing Verrick Yarbrough with a gun or shooting a gun.
Like I said, Mr. Sims' body is pointed west. The bullet entered 6 inches down. I'm going to demonstrate on the back of my head because I want you to be able to see. About 1 inch to the right off center. The bullet was said to travel in a straight path and ended right by his right eyeball.
If Verrick was shooting, the shell casings would be right here, next to where Verrick is standing. As you can see, and as we know from the forensics, that the .380 shell casings eject to the right. They would have to be inches to the right side next to Verrick Yarbrough.
The bullet's trajectory may have been able to hit his head here, but it would have ended up over here. Puts a lot of holes in her story. Of course, none of this was brought out at trial for some reason, or even discussed in the police's investigation. Said that he saw Mr. Sims standing by this car. He said that when the shots fired, he started running in a horseshoe pattern and ended up going in the northwestern direction. Well, that places him in the right direction for the bullets to come a straight shot. The problem is every witness that says Verrick was shooting puts him too far north. And Verrick wasn't your shooter.
Here is a scene where a shootout takes place outside of a teenage youth club, resulting in the murder of a teenager by the name of Razio Sims, who was shot in the back of the head with a .380 automatic handgun by a teenager named Dayron Jackson Warren. These are facts and evidence that led detectives to their murder suspect, Dayron Jackson Warren. Number 1, a 911 phone call from a witness regarding the homicide. This 911 phone call resulted in information leading to the names and descriptions of Dayron Jackson and Greg Hughes.
Here is a photo of Dayron Warren. Light skin, skinny dude, curly hair coming down sort of like a mop. Eyes slanted. Kind of tall. This is an accurate description of Dayron Warren. Monica Jenkins' trial testimony also gives another accurate description of the suspect she saw with a gun.
Monica Jenkins testified that 4 to 5 people got into a car next to hers, and she saw one of them with a gun in his hand. He had on a black t-shirt. He was light-skinned. His hair was curly. His eyes were slanted, kind of like Korean. The suspect got into the passenger side of the car next to hers. This is also accurate with the facts and evidence of the description of Daron Warren by Detective Miller from the surveillance videos after the shooting.
Moving forward, the Tacoma Police Department detective, Gene Miller, did a follow-up on the names provided in the 911 call regarding the homicide. He discovered that the suspect, Daron Jackson Warren, had fled to another state. However, Detective Gene Miller found Greg Hughes in a juvenile detention center called Raymond Hall, and Greg Hughes admitted to the following facts. He and his cousins, Daron Jackson Warren and Terrell Jackson, broke into a home, burglarized it, and stole a 380. Days later, they all traveled to Club Friday together in company of stolen 380. They snuck into the club with stolen 380. As the club was ending, they left with Daron Jackson Warren in possession of the stolen 380. While outside, Daron Jackson Warren got into an argument with a rival gang member that led to Daron Jackson Warren shooting at rival with stolen 380, killing Rocio Sims. Detective Gene Miller followed up on this information. He sent forensic specialists to the home that was burglarized. The victim of the burglary stated his 380 was stolen from his home. The forensics found fingerprint matches for Greg Hughes and his cousins, proving they stole the 380 and took it to Club Friday. Greg Hughes, Daron Jackson Warren, and Terrell Jackson were all charged with the burglary and possession of stolen 380. Moving forward, detectives caught up with Daron Jackson Warren and Terrell Jackson. They both admitted to traveling together and their group of cousins to Club Friday. Terrell Jackson implicated Daron Jackson Warren as the shooter. Daron Jackson Warren admitted that shots came from his group. Other witnesses also implicated Daron Jackson Warren as the shooter, including the victim's best friend, Darius Stokes, who pointed Daron Jackson Warren out in a photo montage as the person he saw shoot his best friend, Rocio Sims. Detective Gene Miller had more than enough evidence to charge his suspect, Daron Jackson Warren. However, during his investigation, he found out the shooting was said to have been gang motivated between Hilltop Crips and 9-6 folks. The detectives came across a witness that said they thought some girl was on the phone with the suspect. This girl was Tamara Jennings. Detectives interviewed Tamara Jennings, found out that she was not outside at the time of the shooting, didn't witness the shooting, didn't speak to anyone involved in the shooting. She knew the victim, and she was dealing with a breakup from an ex-boyfriend named Verrick. The owner of Club Friday was Brian Boyd. He was also the cousin of Tamara Jennings. Detectives asked Brian Boyd if he had heard the name Verrick. Brian Boyd said that he had heard the name before inside the club. All of this information was unrelated to the shooting. However, Detective Miller still decided to put the name Verrick in the police database and found out that Verrick was on file as a Hilltop Crip. Due to the shooting being gang-related, Detective Miller ran with this hunch, arrested Verrick for interview. Verrick's name is Verrick Yarbrough. Verrick stated that he was at the club and didn't see anything. Detective Miller attempted to get him to cooperate. Verrick refused. Detective Miller took this personal, booked Verrick Yarbrough for murder in the first degree without warrant or probable cause. Detective Gene Miller then began to build a case against Verrick Yarbrough, manipulating each minor to frame Verrick Yarbrough by creating false narratives and letting them sign it. Also, giving Verrick's name to witnesses, coaching them to misidentify and implicate Verrick. Even Detective Miller's own co-worker, Detective Vault, wrote a narrative regarding a witness that proves Detective Miller's narratives were false. State's witnesses even admit that Detective Miller gave them Verrick's name. Also, witnesses that had first-hand knowledge of Verrick Yarbrough's innocence and first-hand knowledge that Daron Jackson Warren shot and killed Rocio Sims were manipulated and threatened to implicate Verrick Yarbrough. While Verrick Yarbrough was awaiting trial, he had his friend get a hold of the shooter, Dayron Jackson Warren, on a three-way call, and Verrick attempted to get Dayron Jackson Warren to tell the truth and turn himself in. During this recorded jail phone call, Dayron Jackson Warren directly and indirectly admitted to the burglary of the gun and shooting at Club Friday. It should be noted that all witnesses spoken of here are all minors. If, after reviewing all of this evidence, you still don't believe Verrick Yarbrough was an innocent teenager framed by Detective Miller and police misconduct, then you must believe in Detective Miller. So here it is in his own words. I, Detective Miller, continue to conduct follow-up investigation on this case. I received word that Dayron Warren, who was being sought for a burglary, unlawful possession of a firearm warrant issued through Pierce County Superior Court, was possibly in Las Vegas. It is my belief that the weapon stolen in that burglary was the murder weapon in this case. As a result, I wanted to speak with Warren. I also received information regarding jail phone calls made by arrestee Yarbrough to Warren, where Warren may have made statements regarding this homicide. I have obtained those phone records through a Pierce County Superior Court search warrant and have listened to the calls for contact. That information will be included on the separate supplemental report. I asked Warren if he wanted to speak with me. He said yeah. Warren then asked me how I knew he was part of the burglary. I spoke for several minutes about how I didn't believe that Warren was a bad person, but that I knew that he had done a bad thing. I told Warren that it was clear that he was being led down the wrong path, and Warren replied yeah. I told Warren that I believed that he would not want to hurt someone, but someone was hurt and it was time to deal with that. Warren nodded up and down. I then told Warren that I knew he was involved in the burglary. I knew he had possession of the murder weapon on the night of the shooting. I knew that he fired the weapon outside the club. I told Warren that I knew the what happened, but I wanted to understand the why. This went on for a couple minutes, during which Warren never made any denial. I then played a small portion of the jail phone recording between Yarbrough and him to show Warren that I was being truthful and that I knew. I wanted to show Warren that there was no reason to protect anyone else but himself, but that meant I needed the truth. At this point, I decided to talk about intent versus recklessness. I explained that there is a difference between trying to do something and something accidentally happening. I told Warren that the time for a denial was gone because I already knew. I told him that he needed to explain the why. I asked Warren if he wanted to hit Rah-Rah Sims or if it just happened. I asked him if he wanted to hit Sims or was he just throwing rounds downrange. I reminded him that there was no one to protect but himself. I told Warren that I needed to understand what made him do it.
Just like Detective Miller just admitted, he has the evidence that gives him the knowledge of the fact that Dayron Jackson Warren committed this murder of Razio Sims, but he wants to understand why Dayron Jackson Warren did it. It seems as though this corrupt detective, Gene Miller, is attempting to get the actual killer help him clear his conscience, due to the fact that he's letting the actual killer walk free while an innocent teen is on trial being framed and facing a life sentence because of Detective Miller's corruption. Another disturbing fact is that the prosecuting attorney in Verrick Yarbrough's trial, Gerald Costello, is fully aware of this evidence that came from Detective Miller that proves Verrick Yarbrough's innocence, but still allowed witnesses that were minors to perjure themselves to get the jury to wrongfully convict Verrick Yarbrough and sentence the innocent teen to 66 years. The state's case was perfectly painted inside of a frame. The state's case in this trial was so unconstitutional that the prosecutor told the jury in closing arguments out his own mouth that it is a fact and the law that the state does not need to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. In other words, we don't have to prove anything. Just convict Verrick Yarbrough, even though he's not guilty.
All of the state's witnesses spoke to 3 different police officers. All 3 times, they all said that they did not see the shooting and did not know who was shooting. This was until Detective Miller got a hold of them. Once Detective Miller got a hold of them, all their narratives drastically changed. From not seeing or knowing who was shooting to implicating Verrick Yarbrough. Evidence proves Detective Miller created these false narratives and had the witnesses sign it. Moreover, during trial, State witnesses testified they didn't see Verrick Yarbrough with a gun or shooting a gun, and he had no involvement. State witnesses also said Detective Miller told them Verrick's name. Also, state witnesses said they didn't recall giving Detective Miller Verrick's name. Even Detective Duvall, that worked with Detective Miller in this case, has narrated information proving Detective Miller falsified his narratives and committed perjury. The entire case that the state put on and displayed in regards to the physical evidence of the case all proved that Verrick Yarbrough was not involved in this shooting. This was clearly proven by medical, forensics, and firearms specialists, all professionals that testified at trial regarding all the information that was gathered in this investigation.
This means that physical, material, and scientific evidence proves that Verrick Yarbrough is innocent.
Let's go here. So could you give me your full name, please? Your legal name, the name that's on your record?
My name is Derek Stokes.
It's Darius Stokes?
Yeah.
S-T-O-K-E-S?
Yeah.
Okay. And let's see, you understand you're being recorded, is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, were you, what was the name of the club you were at?
At Club Friday. No, it was supposed to be part of the fight, but I guess somebody else just pulled out a gun and started shooting. But Verrick wasn't nowhere near over there.
Okay, so
So
Verrick...
that's why I was thinking like, oh, I don't know why that they locked up Verrick and he wasn't even over there. It was a group.
And again, Verrick wasn't involved with either group.
No, he was not.
Was Verrick involved in any conversation with the shooter or with Rachel before the shooting started?
No, not that I know of.
Okay. How soon after the incident were you interviewed by the police?
I was interviewed by some guy named Miller, but every time he talked to me, he talked about Verrick or whatever. He really didn't talk about the situation at hand. He was just talking about Verrick.
So...
He was talking about... He really didn't talk about, like, who really shot him and stuff. He was just really talking about Verrick.
So did it sound like he'd already... Go ahead.
I even told him that Verrick wasn't even the one that shot him. He was just like, well, we're not going to talk about that right now.
Okay, so you actually told this what, a detective or a uniformed officer?
I think it was a detective.
Okay. And what did you say his name was? Do you recall?
You said what?
What was his name? Do you recall?
I think it was Gene Miller or something like that.
Okay, Miller. Okay. Was it your impression, based on the kind of conversation, based on the kind of questions that he was asking you, that he thought Verrick was the shooter?
Yeah. He thought that's what it is. Yeah, basically. He was asking questions like that.
Okay. But you actually told him Verrick wasn't involved and was not the shooter?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you testify in court?
Yeah, I did.
And what was the nature? Go ahead.
When I was in court, I was gonna, my lawyer kept telling me to plead the fifth and don't incriminate yourself, but I was really gonna tell them, as soon as they were telling me my name and stuff, like, what's your name, and, do you know Verrick, and I was like, yeah, and I was gonna tell them, like, he didn't do the shooting. Once I was finished saying that, they and my lawyer cut me off. He cut me off the speaker and was like, "Wait, don't say nothing. Just plead the fifth." Which I was going to tell them the truth, but my lawyer told me not to, basically to not incriminate myself. So I pled the fifth.
Okay, and then you were done testifying, and that was it for your involvement?
Yeah, that was it.
Okay.
My name is Darius Marlowe, and I was an eyewitness to the murder of Razio Sims by Dawan Warren Jackson on 7/8/2006. The evidence was covered up by Detective Gene Miller, a corrupted detective. He worked for the Tacoma Police Department. He used minors. He coerced these minors. He threatened these minors with a 15 to 20-year sentence to frame Mr. Verrick Yarbrough. There's so much police misconduct in this case, and we have been silenced for too long. It's time for truth and justice. It needs to be revealed. Please support this petition for the justice and immediate release of Mr. Verrick Yarbrough. I was there. I know the evidence, and I was silenced. Sent to prison for 13 years. I was there, incarcerated for a witness to a murder warrant while this trial was going on, and was never called to testify. If you look through the records, you'll see over 70 hours of jail phone calls made to my residence. If you read the transcripts of these phone calls, you will see one where it's me, Mr. Yarbrough, and Mr. Warren. Mr. Warren is admitting to murdering Mr. Sims. It's been 14 long years, and Mr. Yarbrough has been silenced. Justice was never given to the Simmons family. The killer walked free. Just to murder again? All we ask is that you review the evidence. It's never too late for justice to be served. It's never too late.
My name is Verrick Yarbrough, and 14 years ago, when I was 17 years old, I was abducted by the Tacoma Police Department and framed for a murder that I didn't commit. Detective Gene Miller built the case against me and lied, manipulated minors, even used the actual killer to frame me because I refused to cooperate. Detective Miller wanted to question me as a witness to a murder, and the way he handled me and cuffed me up for no reason at all had me uncomfortable, and I wanted to talk to my mother, and he refused me that right. I told him that I did not want to talk to him. He booked me on murder one charges without warrant and without probable cause, and built a case against me using the actual murderer, the actual killer. I witnessed Deron Jackson Warren kill Razio Sims, and because I wouldn't tell on him, Detective Miller used him against me to frame me for the murder that he committed. When I was locked up in the county jail, I even attempted to call Deron Warren and ask him to step up and tell the truth for what he did. He took advantage of me and went along with Detective Miller's plan to frame me. They had all the evidence, all the way down to fingerprints, possession charges, confessions, witnesses, police phone calls that proved that Deron Jackson Warren committed this murder. And Detective Gene Miller covered it all up just to frame me after he even knew that Deron Jackson Warren killed Razio Sims. It's been 14 long years and I've been silenced this entire time. And now, justice has to be served. This wrongful conviction can possibly turn into a wrongful death sentence. This COVID-19 is spreading wild in here. I'm being neglected of medical treatment. As you can see my face, you can see, you know? And this stuff is killing people in here every day. People are dying, people are getting sick, and I'm sitting here for no reason. I ask that you please hear my cry for help and support the petition on my behalf. We have all the evidence to prove my innocence and prove who actually committed this murder.